And all right, we're live, guys. Let's just open up. Hold on a second. Let me open up um the page here. Okay, so we are here we go. We're middle of the complicated laws of cooking. Now, when I say cooking, I mean how do we don't cook on Shabbos, but how do we retain food to be hot? Part of the idea is that part of what the Tzaddokim, those who didn't believe in the oral law, felt that we shouldn't have anything hot on Shabbos. There shouldn't be anything that's not that if no fire should be lit on Shabbos. They had no light, no fire, no food was cold. So we have our custom is that not only can we have warm food, but we should have warm food. We have chamin on Shabbos, but of course we have laws and we have to be careful in the middle of those laws of how do we make sure our food is warm on Shabbos at the same time we don't do anything, God forbid, to desecrate the Shabbos. Now, what like I told Barbara initially when we started this class, after the Kitzur, on when we finish a few laws, we're going to go over to the Shmir Shabbos Kehilchathah, which is more modern approach to the laws of Shabbos. And hey, Howard is on YouTube. So we're going to, but right now we're going to learn the laws the way they were published in the Kitzur. I just want to say we're talking about retaining the heat. I was in a store yesterday, and they have a new invention. I think it must have been designed by an Israeli, of a foldable blech. A blech is the hot plate that we use to keep our food warm. So they have a foldable gumi. It's made out of a kind of a rubbery. He told me it's not as hot. Hold on, Barbara. It's not as hot as what we have. You're on mute. It's not as hot as a metal hot plate, but it's quite hot to retain the heat. Yes, Barbara.
This is what I was telling you about because I have seen those on Amazon, and I was wondering if it would get hot enough to keep something warm, like if I set a plate on it or something.
So,
But
so I
yeah,
a- I a- I asked the seller yesterday. So it's like a rubber folding thing. It has the hechsher of the rabbanim that it's kosher. It's even more. It's even less of an issue than even the hot metal plates. So you could manage. He says you could even take off and put it back on, which we're going to learn that once you take off the fire, it's hard that you can't put it back on the fire if it rests on the table, the ground, the countertop. But he did tell me that. It's not, it's just, it really will keep things the way they are. It's not moisiv hevel at all. It doesn't add any kind of heat. The problem of taking off, if you have a cholent and you take it off the cholent, let's say, that's the example usually what people keep hot, which is the chamin, they call it in Hebrew. So if you take the cholent off the blech, off the hot plate, and you leave it on the countertop for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, and put it back on, you're basically cooking the food again because you're putting it back, it was cold and you're making it hot again. So if you're holding it just temporarily and you haven't placed it on the ground and you can't hold on, Aaron, you're giving it support. So then that's how people would take the cholent and put it back on. And you have to make sure to cover it before you put it back on. He said this hot plate is not really it doesn't add any heat at all. So if it's going to cool down, it's going to stay cold. If it's hot, it'll retain its heat. Yes, Aaron.
What about soup?
Soup, same thing. You can't put it back on once you take it off. But if you're just taking a little bit of soup and you're holding it first, because if you haven't, it has to be placed down. Once you place it down on the tabletop or the countertop and like let go, then it's lost its right to go back on the fire. But if it's a kind of a movement still while you're still holding it, you take out a bowl of soup and you put it back down, it hasn't really settled for it to be called that it's taken off the fire to go back on the fire. Yes, Barbara. Barbara, your hand is up and your mic is off.
that's Rebecca.
Where's Rebecca? Sorry. Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
Hi, sorry about the background noise, but I'm guessing that pertains only to liquids and not to solids, because I thought solid food you could put back on the blech or the hot plate or whatever.
Well, not directly, but if you have like they have like a separation, like if you to put it,
Right.
yeah, but I'm talking about directly on top of the blech. You could this. I'll just try to post a picture later, or if not on the group. And Barbara says that she has that you see it already on Amazon. I didn't know that they're selling it in the States. I thought it was something that's made in Israel. It could be it's made in Israel now. They're selling it in the States, but that's mamish. She told me the person explained to me it's mamish, not really it keeps things, it retains heat, but does not add any kind of heat. Yes, Aaron.
Sorry to keep up on the same subject, but okay. So you have foods that can't stay out overnight. So you go to bed and you put them in the refrigerator so they don't go bad. But can you reheat them on the kosher Israeli blech?
No, so the regular blech that you buy, the metal ones that plug in, like are with a sheet metal wrapped around the thing. So that's good. You could keep things on that because what we're going to learn about now in the next law is the concern of adding heat. So adding heat is a concern, meaning that you're going to turn up the flame, you're going to mix the coals. So a blech, those electric blechs don't have that problem because there's no knobs and it's totally colored. You plug it in and that's it, and it retains a set heat. This other blech it never gets that hot, so it's different. But if you wanted to take cold food out of the fridge and put it on, again, we're going to learn those laws about if it's liquid and how hot is it going to get. But to put it directly on the blechinat, but if you put it on, let's say, a pot that's on the blech for solids, it's allowed. So if you have, let's say, a pot and you want to lean something on top, you want to put something on top of that pot. So that's not even a blech. That's like already even a more reduced heat, and therefore it's less of a problem. But to take something directly out of the fridge and put it on your electric hot plate that you could retain food on, that's not allowed. But I do believe, I don't know about taking out of the fridge for this foldable one, but I just walked in by chance into that store yesterday, but from what I understood I never tried it. I have to read a little more, but what he explained to me was that doesn't really get that hot. Like if you can't keep a cholent on that over Shabbos, just not because of halacha, just because it's not going to taste good, because it's not hot enough to keep, maybe a soup hot enough, liquid, but to keep it, a cholent kind of, gets flavor, while it's cooking. That's not going to happen on those things. All right. So we're holding a law 18. Hatafshilin, and this is what we're learning that. This is the laws of Hatmana. Rebecca, your hand is still raised. If you're still asking a question, let me know. If not, then I better to unraise your hand so I know next time you're raising. Okay, thanks. So Hatafshilin shematminim betanor. If you want to hatmana, you want to place cooked food in an oven on Shabbos, leyem Shabbos kenohog, to keep it for Shabbos as is the custom, as is our custom, as he writes. Alpha pisha pesach eine tuach betit. So even though the door is not sealed with a mortar, tit is a mortar that would those days they kind of had those ancient ovens, right? Not the ones we have today on hinges. So alpha pisha pesach eine tuach betit mutar, it is permitted. So it's permitted to leave food in the oven. That we'll learn what kind of oven and what the situation is. But you should not open the door of the oven on the night of Shabbos, meaning Friday night, because that possibly the foods have not been totally cooked yet, and you're adding heat by reclosing the oven. That's the problem of reclosing something. So, like I said before, if you open the cholent, you're not allowed to open the cholent on a lot of people get cholent crazy, right? Make sure the cholent is good and cooking and the heat is good, right? Cholent takes it causes a lot of anxiety on cholent makers. I'm a cholent maker myself, so I know it's a challenge not to open the top to make sure there's enough liquids to make sure it's not cooking too hot, too low. So so you want to check the cholent. You can't open it because once you open it, the heat goes out, and when you close it, you're sealing in the heat. So what the Kitzur is saying is you can't open the oven Friday night, even if it's not sealed. So he's saying the idea if it was sealed, it would prevent you from opening it. So it doesn't have to be sealed, but you're not allowed to open it. Because if you open it, then when you reclose it, the problem is not the opening, the problem is the reclosing. When you reclose it, so then all of a sudden the heat starts to build up again, and that you've now caused something to change, even though hypothetically, it would have continued had you not opened it, but you didn't do that on Shabbos. Yes, Aaron.
So, as a cholent maker, um, you can't really even eat it until Saturday because you would open it and you would want some for Saturday. So you can't eat it on Friday.
This is a long footnote. If you take it off in the permissible way, like I said, if you take it off the fire, hold it, don't put it down, then you open it, take out your cholent, close it, and put it back on. But to open up the pot and take out of it while it's on the fire, you're not allowed to know.
What about most people I know? I'm not okay. They use a slow cooker, or a crock pot, whatever you want to call it.
Crockpot, a crockpot. We're going to learn about the crockpot soon. The crockpot is, in theory, a little bit more challenging than the blech because the crockpot is surround heat as opposed to on top heat. So even
So what do you do?
I don't know. Halachically, the crockpot, what people do today is you have to put in. Some people put in a little silver foil. Some people put in an entire, like to make it another separation in the crockpot. So there's the metal base, the earthenware pot, which is that pot that sits in the base, and they'll put in between that another a blech, so to say, of the silver foil. So it's not 100, or they lift it up a bit. People put in little silver foil balls. So it shouldn't be 100% inside. So it shouldn't be, we're going to learn in a second about 100% sitting inside. The crockpot's a bit of a challenge. But if you line it with silver foil, it's fine. We're going to learn about the crockpot a little in more detail. But definitely to open the crockpot on Shabbos and take out cholent and close it, that's not allowed. What you could do is you could take the entire pot out. Make sure you hold it the whole time. Means you don't have to hold it mid-ear. It could support the base could be supported on the countertop or tabletop, but you're still holding it. It hasn't been placed on the table, like let go. And on the other hand, it's a kind of an operation. But if you need to have cholent Friday night, you'll figure it out, right? So you have to take the top off while you're still holding it. So you have one hand like this, you take it off, you take it in. You don't want to mix too much but even though it's not on the fire, and then you take out your cholent, what you want, and then you put back on the top before, and then replace it back inside or on top of the blech. Okay. Now we're going to learn so in footnote number 93 is going to give us, it's very small writing for most of you, so I hope all others are looking at it in your own on your own screens. The halachas of hatmana are numerous. Okay, hatmana means to hide. And so Kitzur puts it in a short law. The following is a brief introduction that will enable you to understand these important laws. There are two concepts, one called shihiyah, which means leaving food on the fire or in an oven, etc. So that would be the blech. It's not hidden, it's on top of a fire. And hatmana. Hatmana means litmo is to hide. Hatmana, which means hiding. Hiding is more of a problem than shehiyah, which is leaving something on. Let's say before they came out with electric blech, when I was a child, what did they have? They had the metal tops, right? You put a sheet of metal. Usually the sheet was shaped. Hold on, Aaron. The sheet was like a long L, so to say. And the bottom part of the L covered the knobs, so you shouldn't have access to the knobs, and so you wouldn't be tempted to turn up the flame. And the rest of the sheet covered the stove, and that worked fine for many years. Obviously, the concern is if it's a gas oven and all that, if you want to leave gas running in your house, but not halachically, safety questions. But then they came out with electric top that helped things out. Yes, Aaron.
Just repeat. You just said I'm taking notes again. Shiva, leaving on the fire, and what's the second word?
Hatmana, hiding, which would be like the crockpot, which is he's going to define it in a second. Hatmana, which means hiding. In other words, covering the pot to keep it warm. So the pot itself is not just sitting on top of something, but it's being kept warm in something. That's retaining the heat in a stronger way. Now, there's different ways of hatmana. Back in the day, I still remember. I don't know if people do today. I still remember that people didn't want to keep a blech running. For whatever reason, would wrap their soup on Friday night, not for Shabbos day, it doesn't work, but to keep soup hot that's been boiling before Shabbos in a towel or something. Not towel is not strong enough, but a blanket. But it's not on a fire; it's off the fire totally, just wrapped in a blanket. On an open, but it's not just being atmana, which means hiding in other words, covering the pot to keep warm. There is a rabbinical prohibition against leaving certain foods on an open coals because then you might stir the coals on Shabbos. That's the concern. That you move the coals to keep to kind of speed up the cooking. Tosfos and Rosh, these are both Rishonim, means the first age of rabbis after the Gaonim, after the beginning of the age of Responsa. So the Tosfos, the Rosh, Rashi, that's that group of people, which the Rishonim went up until the age. Rosh is from the last ones. So the Rosh lived, he's the father of the Torah, which is already the beginning of Achronim. So that's kind of the time of the Spanish Inquisition, about 1500 or so. Is Tosfos and the Rosh rule that this prohibition is applicable even on Erev Shabbos. That even on Erev Shabbos, you can't leave things on a flame. And thus, food may not be left on the coals over Shabbos unless it's completely cooked. So the Rosh and the Tosfos hold the food has to be initially completely cooked to be left on the fire, so then there's no longer the concern of moving the coals because the mission has been accomplished. The Shulchan Aruch, meaning Rabbi, hold on, Aaron. You're going to have to let me go a little further because it could be some of your questions will be answered.
Okay,
so the Shulchan Aruch in chapter 253, Sif 1, seems to agree with that it has to be completely cooked, but we are accustomed to follow Rashi's rulings and permit this on Erev Shabbos if it is half cooked, or 1/3 if need be. So if it's 1/3 in worst case scenario, or if it's half cooked, then you could already leave it on, which makes it fit to be eaten with difficulty. Meaning, if it's cooked, it's not the dish as you would like it. You could get a soup or a cholent, right? Like Aaron was saying, Friday night cholent. Everyone knows Friday night cholent is not Shabbos, early afternoon cholent, but it's edible. The potatoes are not really soaked in, but the potatoes are cooked, so it can be eaten with difficulty. The Bir Halacha on the Shulchan Aruch says that it is preferable to be stringent in this matter. She should be strict and not follow the ruling of Rashi and make sure the food is completely cooked. In our times, we use gas or electric heat. It means that the concern of the coals, of a person actually sticking a stick into the coals to speed up the heat, the idea is to speed up the cooking, is not a concern today because it's not common. I'm not going to say it's not done. It's not common to cook on coals, but the prohibition remains for you are liable to adjust the flame. The same issue is there, not with the coals, but with the knobs. You're going to turn the knobs and make, from low to higher. In the case of a range, you are allowed to put up the meat cholent on Erev Shabbos, even if it is only slightly cooked when Shabbos arrives, if you remove all the coals, which is called grifa. Means the problem is the coals. So if you get rid of the coals, but the base is still hot, so then you could leave it because you've gotten rid of this is the foundation of the blech. Or you cover the coals, which is called ketima, totally cover the coals so you don't have access to the coals, and then you can't stir the coals to make the heat, to bring up the heat. For this reason, we use a blech. That is the foundation of the blech. So based on the ruling of the Bir Halacha that says that we should be careful, so we use a blech to cover both the flame and the knobs. See Igros Moshe, Orach Chaim responds in 93. Since this makes the range ketuma, however, Rabbi Akiva Eger ruled that ketuma is not sufficient if the food is not at least half cooked before Shabbos. So Rabbi Akiva Eger says it's still a problem. Because if it's not half cooked before Shabbos, even if you covered, it means you didn't do grufa. Grufa means to remove all the coals. So if you haven't removed all the coals, but you just covered all the coals, there's still concern a person may access the coals to put up the heat. See Bir Halacha. Also see Shari Tshuva that the metal sheet blech does not make it ketuma. There's some opinions that the metal blech is not enough. That's why we went to the electric blech. Okay, I'm going to stop here in case, Aaron, you wanted to ask something. Aaron, you had a question before?
Yeah, I was just asking. So I'm using the steak as an example.
The who?
Everyone
Using
eats
what?
their.
Say that again?
I'm going to use the steak.
Okay.
as an example. Everyone eats their steak different. So what's considered fully cooked because
Hmm.
you don't want to break Shabbos.
So the Gemara gives different like there's what's called machal keben destroy, which is like almost 1/3 cooked means that even like the most I don't know how you'd call it today, the most red meat eating person would already eat it, and the Gemara describes a person who's like a thief who just needs a little bit of flame, because he's on the run, right? He doesn't have time to sit down and make himself a shawarma because the police are on his tail. So he just, a little bit of heat, and it's, as long as they tell him that he's not going to end up in the hospital, he's running with it. So anything north of that. But that's the extreme version. Here he's saying half cooked. Half cooked is more than that. That's really the third cooked. Now he says if the meat is totally raw. This is here we have another thing. The concern is when you're trying to speed things up for Friday night. But if the meat is totally raw, where there's no way anything is going to be ready that night, so then there's no concern you're going to stir the pot, and by the time you wake up in the morning, it's already going to be cooked because of the time. So there's the problem is when you're trying to kind of trying to find between meals how much time we have. So he says if the meat is totally raw, you may put it up to cook immediately before Shabbos, and we are not concerned that you will stir the coals. Since the meat was totally raw, on the onset of Shabbos, it will be left untouched all night. That's the ruling of most people. And he says, Rav, sorry, but it's very small writing, so my eyesight is not great. Rav Heineken ruled that in our times, it is best not to rely on this, as our ovens are more efficient, and the meat will probably be properly cooked by the time it is actually Shabbos, according to Rabbeinu Tam. So here, those days, I guess, they did a much slower cook with the coals. Today, we could turn our ovens up to a heat of 350, 500, and we could really speed up the process that even by the time Shabbos comes in, it's already be enough cooked for us to be, meddling with the flames. Who rules that Shabbos begins 72 minutes after sunset, and because Rabbeinu Tam has a longer shkia, so therefore, by him already, the time Shabbos comes in, it may be more cooked, and then we have the concern that you're going to start meddling with the fire. Even putting it in one piece of totally raw meat immediately before Shabbos qualifies the rest of the pot at whatever stage of cooking it may be, Shulchan Aruch Halevi. That's another trick that some people do. Let's say you have the cholent cooked, mostly totally cooked or whatever, and then you just throw in a piece of raw meat to that. You add. So because that raw meat is now in the cholent, it downgrades the quality of the entire cholent. So you're not going to eat any of the cholent because there's the piece of raw meat in there. Imagine you had chicken soup. You made Thursday night even. And then you threw in then it's totally cooked. That's different. But let's say you threw in a piece of raw chicken. You would never touch the food until it's cooked. So therefore, it totally brings the rest of the food down to the level of uncookedness as that one piece of meat. If you put the pot into the oven on Erev Shabbos and seal the oven door, so now you've put something to prevent you from meddling with the fire, with mortar. In those days, they put it in with a mortar. There's no concern that you will stir the coals because it is sealed. That's part of the idea of this metal electric covering. Even if food is totally cooked on Erev Shabbos, so but will improve with. Okay, that's a new point. Now, even if the food is totally cooked, and now there's no concern that you're going to meddle with the coals because there's no benefit, but will improve with shrinking in prolonged heat. So which is called mitztamik v'yafalai. We know there's certain foods that even if they're totally cooked, they get better with time, right? You want to leave the ribs in for 8 hours, so they get softer and softer and softer. So the smaller, the more it contracts, so it shrinks and improves thereby. According to Tosfos, you may not leave it on the range that is not ketuma or grufa, that's not covered or gutted from the coals. As mentioned, it is preferable to be stringent in this matter. If you can, also see Mishnah Brura. Okay, we're going to learn in Hilchah Shabbos, in Shemirath Shabbos Kehilchathah, what we can do. But we see clearly, if you want to go over this footnote, that kind of locks in the issues of leaving food on a flame on Shabbos. Let's go over the rules that we've discussed. We have Rashi and the Tosfos and the Rosh that says unless the food is totally cooked, it should not go on the fire because we are concerned you're going to stir the coals. And if it's completely cooked, we don't have concern. Tosfos says, but if it's completely cooked and will continue to get better even after being completely cooked, we're basically back to the same problem where the person is going to try to continue this cooking, so he or she may meddle with the flame. So then you have the one way of getting out of the Rosh and Tosfos' problem. If it's totally ketuma, now some opinions, ketuma means that the access to the flame has been covered. Some people hold the access to the flame being covered with a metal sheet on top of a stove is not good enough. Gerufa would be totally getting rid of what would be. I don't want to get into the halachas now, but if you pull the fuse out of the fuse out of the electric box, and so you couldn't play with the fires or something else. But that's why we cover the knobs, and we put silver foil on the knobs today. Back in the day when people were still covering the stove, maybe still people do that today. There's the difference. If the food is half cooked, then it's good enough. If it's fully cooked, today's ovens versus old ovens, totally uncooked in a way is better than half cooked, because totally uncooked is less of a concern that you would mess around with the fire. It's just too raw. Again, there's the concern that today's ovens will get rid of that problem. Again, listen, today's fire anyone who makes cholent knows that cholent has to be cooked at a certain flame. The higher, if it goes too high, it's not going to be a cholent, it's going to be burnt. So a cholent, because of the ingredients of the beans and that depends, of course, how people make it. But if you're talking about beans, barley, liquid, potatoes, meat, it has to be a slow cooked food. Cholent it was designed as a slow cooked food. So if it's totally raw and put on the flame, it's much better. If you totally, that's why I'm talking to Aaron about the crockpot. That if you, according to the opinions, if you do not cover the inside of the crockpot with the silver foil, it creates this issue comes up about the cooking, the raw versus the half versus all these opinions. If you're going to if you're putting it in with silver foil, it's like the ketuma where it's kind of separate, or it's more like the grufa where it's kind of as if it was gutted from its goals, and it's not really in a proper heating. It's not placed on the heating. So then, even if it's not cooked, most opinions would prefer a person to have it cooked up to a certain point before Shabbos, or to make it, in some ways, it's even till today, it's better to make the cholent totally raw before Shabbos. But we're going to learn more about the halachas of the blech and cooking on Shabbos. Before we continue to the next law, any questions on this subject? Okay. Now he continues, chapter number 19. This that we say, that a person could hide something even if the oven has not been sealed, like we said before. So dafka keshematim in basar. Now this brings up the question that Rebecca and Aaron were talking about different liquids versus meats. That's only if you are leaving meat, a solid. This would apply with beans and dough. And this is that you have to leave it in early enough. Again, in a way where you're leaving it in the oven before Shabbos, that should have some sort of cooking before. Enough cooked, like you said, how raw is raw. Again, Michael Kiben, sorry, it has to be raw in a way that it's could be eaten chak. It's not preferred to be eaten this way. You're not going to throw it out. Put it that way. But if you're going to put into the stove, into the oven, beans and dough right before night, then you have to place a mortar on the means a covering, a protection to the oven. Because he's saying in the footnote, Misrabel, you haven't taken out the coals properly, there's still coals, or covered the coals properly. So therefore, to avoid meddling with the heat, you would seal the door. But be careful. And if one does not do that, even in worst case scenario, it's already been done. Hamachol masur ma'ad l'motzi Shabbos v'chtei shi'asa. You have a problem because you may cook the food, and therefore let's look in the footnotes in a second. You would not be able to eat the food until Saturday night, and then on Saturday night you would have to wait for how long it would take the food typically to cook. Yes, Aaron.
Okay. So I know because my wife makes a lot of beans, not just for Shabbos, but they could, if you're not using a pressure cooker, the longer you cook them, the more they get better. But dough eventually is going to burn if it's overnight. So I never had a dough that lasted hours and hours and hours. So I don't understand the dough part.
The dough part. The dough part. It's a good question. I want to check into that. It's probably a kind of pie that's that slow cooks, like a kugel. Even a kugel
Yeah,
that's made out of pasta. That's a dough. What's pasta? Pasta is hard dough, right? So that
right. But they don't have an
uh,
overnight Russian kugel, but they have an overnight potato kugel.
yeah, that's a good question about dough. I'm not sure. I was wondering myself. Let's see maybe if the footnotes touch on that. 94, he says, to be eaten with difficulty, this is one half or one third cooked. So he spoke about in the footnote before, the one half or one third cooked. This is called Michael Ben Dersoy. Ben Dersoy was a famous, some people their whole life he was a famous bandit. He was a thief, but he was on the run because he was a thief, and therefore he ate food. He was notorious to eat his food undercooked because he was on the run. So what is he remembered for old times? He defines Shabbos. Imagine that your whole life. Imagine your purpose in this world is to help us define what does it mean cooking on Shabbos. So this is called one third cooked. This is called Malchel Ben Jersoy, the food of a gang bandit who always ate on the run. Okay, and he would therefore, like I said before, he would eat it on the run, meaning he wouldn't properly cook his food. But he had to cook it a little bit, otherwise it was raw. The difference being since what are we talking about here? So footnote number 95. Okay, this is the question that you asked about leaving types of dough. He says over here in English he calls it types of dough. I believe he means a kind of dough that cooks slow, like beans. Beans, you're right. Beans you can't eat. It takes a long time to cook beans if you don't use a pressure cooker. So he says like this: the difference being is meat takes a long time to. Oh well, he says the opposite. Meat takes a long time to cook. It will be left untouched till tomorrow, and there is no need to stir the coals. Whereas ligaments, beans, and dough take less time to cook, and we fear that he will stir the coals and make it edible for Friday night. So it means your real purpose is to let it cook for the night. But you may have changed the plans. When someone knocks on the door and you have extra guests, and all of a sudden you say, you know what, let me put up the heat and I'll cook the beans faster. Again, I'm not sure what kind of beans they had then or how they ate beans then, but today meat cooks faster than that I know than beans itself. All right,
Let's use cholent beans.
maybe chom beans you mean is bad. Okay, and
I don't know. I'm just saying. You said I don't know what kind of beans. Most Ashkenaz Jews, the beans they eat on Shabbos is cholent beans.
yeah. So I'm saying the chom beans take a long time to cook.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean depends how you like them. Okay, if it says over here, but you must be careful about this. If you fail to do this, is forbidden. So says you have to be careful about leaving on the beans and the dough, which could cook faster. So he says like this: Shulchan Aruch, you and your family may not eat it even when it was done without intent, but others may eat it even on the Shabbos if it was done without intent. So if you did a shogeg means without intent, you made a mistake. So you can't benefit, you and your family can't benefit from the shogeg, but someone else can because there was no prohibition done that was done on purpose. But if it's for you, you have to wait till Motzei Shabbos, the Saturday night, and you have to wait until it could cook. So whatever the typical amount of time of cooking these foods. Okay, let's do one or two more laws. The Shabbos Okay, so now Shabbos day, you want to open the oven to take the food out. So that's been covered like they said you should in the mortar. You yourself shouldn't open it because the problem is you're creating a door kind of because it was those days it's not an oven that just closes, but it's you seal the oven with this mortar. So Aidei ein Yehudi, non-Jew should do it. If you don't have a non-Jew, then let a child do it. So it's less of a prohibition. And if there's no children around, then in worse, then the third option is yourself. But not to do it regularly in a regular way, meaning your elbow or your left hand or other ways of shinui that are not typical. Again, showing awareness of the Shabbos. So in footnote number 97, he says, requires only a minor shinui difference. The Ramah says it's not a major shinui, and you don't have to use your teeth to open it, but a shinui, a minor shinui that is enough of a sign. Again, the reason is because the mortar is you're creating a door, you're kind of breaking through the entry. Let's do one more. This is a complicated law. The laws of coffee, liquids. Hamatmin coffee be'erev Shabbos. If someone wants to prepare their coffee pre-made on Shabbos, erev Shabbos means before Shabbos. B'techa guma. You know what? These are complicated laws of hatmana. So let's stop here and open up to questions if you have any questions on what we've studied until now.
Just a quick thing about the liquids. I know someone, he makes the tea strong, like, and then you wouldn't drink it like that. So then on Shabbos, it just adds the water.
But yeah, so we're going to learn about the making of the teas, but the idea that here he's talking about, he's not talking about means the problem is the cooking of the coffee beans or the tea bags. So if you're actually cooking the leaves or the beans or the instant coffee, whatever it is, to make the coffee, that's one problem. The next problem is retaining the heat. If you already made coffee, that we'll learn in footnote number in next week in note 21. If you already cooked the coffee and you want to keep it like in hot, so you could use it now, or that liquid that you're talking about. Now that liquid also, what they would do is, some people are careful not to use a tea bag on Shabbos, so they pre-prepared the coffee in this concentrate form, like you said, and a little bit of that liquid will make a proper tea. Like you said, you would never drink it straight up. It's very concentrated with both caffeine and taste. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, Aaron. Go ahead. Continue.
No, I'm just gonna say one little joke I have, and then I'll relate it to Shabbos. I always say you can tell how religious the shul is based on their coffee bar, and then I go to Chabad and I spend a whole Shabbos there in 770. I live in Brooklyn. You got to do it at least once.
Yes.
Okay. So, anyways, they have their coffee bars huge, and they have hot chocolates and all that, and they keep it open on Shabbos. So, they teach you if you're a newbie in this, they teach you the right ways, and we'll go over it next week.
Yes.
But I'm just saying they have some of the biggest coffee bars, and so they found out a way to do it. So you can have your coffee on Shabbos.
Yeah, yes. Barbara.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've had to give up coffee on Shabbos, but the tea, I've been doing tea, but we can't do tea on Shabbos.
No, what people do is people see we're going to learn this. There's how hot things are. It's called yad. There's how hot is the water, and how many vessels has it gone into, right? To take a hot urn, even a Shabbos urn, and just like you would make a tea during the week, and just take your coffee cup or your teacup and bring it in and pour the hot water in and cook it. That's called a kli rishon. That's right away. So if kli sheni einim mevashel, if it goes into a second vessel, the water loses its heat and it can never cook. But some people still are careful because of the change that happens with the tea, whether it's pouring it in and pouring it in from the the water on top or pouring the water first and then pouring the tea. There's always ways of making it. The safe way that people do is that they pre-prepare the tea. We'll learn about it more in detail, all the laws about making tea, which is something that seems simple, but it's something we all need to know because we all like to drink tea and coffee on Shabbos, is to pre-prepare some people have like Aaron says, pre-prepared concentrate tea, which basically means is let's say you take let's say you drink regular tea. I don't know, whatever the tea is, everyone has different styles they like. You'd put it into what they have, these little tea kind of receptacles, like a little teapot. They'll put in a ton of tea bags before Shabbos, put in a minimum amount of water, not nothing, but a small amount of water versus how many tea bags you have, and let it sit for a long, long time. And then that liquid would become extremely concentrated. And then it's concentrated enough to give life to a proper cup of tea, but you're not cooking the bags have already been cooked. So you've already created the so to say the energy, the raw material for the teas.
Okay. And I was going to ask, where can I find this on Chabad? Because I looked on Chabad under Learning and Values to find this so I could follow along. Because like you said, the printing's kind of small. Where can I find this on Chabad so I can follow along when you're
So
reading?
if you open up the link I sent for the class, I attached the link to exactly where we're holding. So look, you'll see it says it has a link right there. Yes, Rebecca.
So I mean, my understanding is that there are like Torah observant opinions that allow the use of tea bags if you're using a klisheni and you do it a certain way.
Some people do. We'll bring up all the opinions.
Okay.
Later.
But just because we were talking about tea scents, if you're using tea scents, do you first put in the hot water or do you first put in the tea scents?
You would first you don't want it's always better to, if you, let's say you're talking about the cliche, so you take an empty cup and take the water out of the original urn or
Like the urn or something?
Yeah, and then you take that cup and pour it into another cup.
Right.
Then so it's already now sitting in a cliche.
Right.
Then you would pour in the substance. So the cliche
Oh.
if you were to take the substance and put it on the bottom of the cup, which is the cliche, and then pour from the klirishon onto the cliche, so it's pouring from the klirishon to the cliche, it's more of cooking than once it's already in the cliche. Now, if you were to do 3 times, then obviously avoid the problem. That's making things really complicated. Yes, Aaron.
I was just going to say, in the Sephardic shuls that sometimes I visit, so they leave a cup on you have a handle that you push down to let the water flow. So they put a cup on top of it so everyone uses the same cup because it's just holding the water. And someone told me it's best to do 3 times, but whatever, 2 to 3 times, because then you have reduced the heat enough that you're not cooking.
The question we answered this, yeah. And Irui clearation is different. People are we're going to learn all the laws covering the laws of salting food, salting liquids, salting foods, a davar gush, something that's solid, how long it retains its heat. Solid foods retain heat more. These are difficult laws. The laws of cooking on Shabbos are not easy, and we'll get to it, and salt, etc. All in due course. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining. Again, it's a big mitzvah. Thank you, Barbara, for sponsoring this class. It should be for you a schus for all that you need, begashmis, physically, materially, and spiritually. And it's a big schus to learn Hilchah Shabbos, to learn laws of Shabbos, especially Erev Shabbos, Friday, Thursday afternoon, Wednesday night. Laila Tov, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.